winning resume webinar. Looks like we've got about 50 people here. I'll just do a brief introduction and let you know what the webinar is about while we let everybody sign on. My name is Rachel. I'm a registered nurse, an ICU nurse, and I have experience in travel nursing, permanent nursing, per diem nursing. I currently work per diem in the ICU still. I work for Vivian, which is a job place for you to come and search for jobs. It's the best search experience on the site. And I also work with the nurse concierge team. So Audra, if you want to start pulling up the slides for the webinar, that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Slides. Give some extra time as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
You able to see the screen?
So like I said, this is the Build a Winning Resume webinar hosted by myself and Audra. Audra, if you'll click to the next page for me, that would be great. So Vivian's mission is to empower every healthcare professional to find their perfect job opportunity faster and easier than ever before. And your nurse concierge team is here to help. Audra and I are both members of the nurse concierge team, and we spend a lot of time interacting with candidates and interviewing candidates as well as recruiters. And we noticed that the resumes could use a little work. There's a lot of inconsistencies, the formats are all different, and it seems that there's just a lot of opinions on what a resume should look like. So we got with the recruiters and the hiring managers that we work with, and we asked them what they're looking for. And we're here to kind of show you how to hack the system and get hired quicker and get the attention of the hiring manager on your resume. So like I said, I've been an ICU nurse for 10 years. I work on the nurse concierge team, so does Audra. I'm gonna have her take it from here. Audra, go ahead.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Audra Williams. As Rachel said, I'm part of the concierge team as well. I have been a nurse for 9 years. 8 years was spent on the bedside. My specialty and background is in ICU, critical care medicine, and I have also done some PACU at a sports medicine clinic and legal nurse consulting on the side. And now I work for Vivian, and we are excited to bring you guys this resume building webinar and bring some really good, juicy information for you guys. So here's some quotes that I got from our partners here at Vivian. A recruiter probably spends 5 to 10 seconds reviewing a resume. Having a clear and precise resume is key. The objective for employment should be clear to minimize the guesswork from the recruiter's perspective, as well as the ATS is more likely to match that resume to the attention of the recruiter. This just means that your resume should minimize any kind of confusion for what job you're going for. If you tailor your resume to the job you're applying for, it minimizes the guesswork for the recruiter to understand what you are wanting, as well as the ATS system. And we'll explain more about what the ATS system is in a little bit later. A brief overview of the table of contents you can expect. We are going to cover resume formatting, go over what hiring managers truly want, the do's and don'ts. We'll show some examples there, and what an application tracking system is. First up, resume formatting. What comes first? This is you. We want to see your name, your contact information, which includes a professional email and a phone number and updated residential information. You don't always have to add your residential information if you choose not to, but if you do, please make sure it's updated. Sometimes if you're applying for a job with an old address, you can confuse people they'll be like, why are you applying and you don't live in this area? So make sure that's updated and keep your professional email as well. Next, you have write a catching summary or objective at the top of the resume. For this catching summary, you will want to quantify your experience, which is give your years of experience in your background, qualify yourself, what skills you have that make you a viable candidate for the job you're applying for, as well as explain what you want. Tell them what you're seeking. And this means it goes back to tailoring your resume to the job you're applying for. If you're going for a case management position, put what experience you have in roles that support a case management role, and then put that you're seeking that case management role. Make sure you don't have a generic scripted resume. They want to know that you want that job and that's what you're after. And then there's two types of resumes. You'll have functional versus chronological. In healthcare, work history and skills are most important, and that's what they want to see. They want to see your work history, where you've been working, and what skill set you bring to the table. For all healthcare professionals, reverse chronological order is what you want. So reverse chronological order means your current employee first. So this will be your most current employee. You will want to list out the company name and facility name, the position that you are working in, and dates of employment. And you want to do your employment history up to 7 years. Under each employment held, you want to do 3 to 6 bullet points to highlight your skills and career details here. And we'll go over these skill sets and the career details to help you pick out the best ones. After your employment history, you'll want to do education, licensure, and certifications. On the education, put where you went to school, what degree you achieved and completed, and the date completed. Then you'll want to do your licensure. This is your RN license. Look up the number, write your number on there, give the date it expires, and as well as your ACLS, BLS, CCRN, TNCC, all of those certifications that you've worked hard for, make sure you add those on here. And then at the end, you can do accomplishments, volunteer work, and hobbies. This is optional, but this is a really good spot if you have won a Daisy Award, or you were entered for a Daisy Award. Were you the Nurse Nightingale? Did you get Nurse of the Year? Are you actively involved in your community? All these little things just help boost yourself and make you stand out a little bit more than maybe someone else that's applying for the same job. Highlighting skills and career details. So as mentioned before, you want to do the 3 to 6 bullet points with each job. List the skills that are related to the job you're applying for. As I said earlier, if you're applying for a case management position, what skills did you learn in your roles that support that? If you are going for an infusion nurse position, do you have those IV skill sets that they're looking for? Make sure you add those on there. Were you a resource called on to start IVs? That's something that you can put as your bullet point. And, that's just very, a resourceful nurse used to start IVs for the hospital. Just give yourself some really good backing there and what you've been doing. So you're going to have hard skills and soft skills. Hard skills are the skills that you've learned through education, classes, through courses, through, any of those type of things. So hard skills, that's can you run a CRRT machine? Are you good at IV starting? Can you do post-heart patients, chest tubes, anything that's a learned skill, that's what you're going to want to put there with those. And then your soft skills, that's who you are and what makes you a really good employer. Are you an effective communicator? Are you a team player? All those types of things, that's what you're going to do for your soft skills. Quantify your experience and use action verbs. Quantifying your experience is just simply as it sounds, adding number behind your experience. So in your unit, if you have 35 beds, add the 35 beds. If you see, this many patients per day, add the number of patients. Give them a number. Numbers stand out. As well as, using action verbs. Every unit has protocols and you guys are working to reduce CODIs, you're working to reduce CLABSIs, all of those things, you're going to have metrics and numbers, and those are your metrics and numbers as well. You're part of that team that's driving that success and pushing those numbers wherever they need to go to get towards the goals. And like, you can add that onto your experience. If you're going for an infection control nurse position, write down your unit's metrics on the CODIs, on the CLABSIs. Get creative, add those numbers. They really do stand out. Describe your actions. I had a recruiter tell me that, of course, like I understand that they are driven, but how are you driven? I understand that you're a team player, but what makes you a team player? Describe those actions. This could be supported my unit by being a part of the unit-based committee. This could be supported coworkers during short-staffed periods of the pandemic by picking up extra shifts, supported new graduate nurses by precepting, educating. All of those things are describing your actions more, and they stand out than the average. I am driven, I am talented. Be specific, simple, and clean. Being specific, simple, and clean gets your point across. It minimizes the guesswork for the recruiters, and it just looks really nice if you can get your point across. So what do hiring managers truly want? Reliable, dependable, proactive, excellent communication, effective, a supportive team member, quality care, and time management skills. You guys all might be thinking like, of course, like we all possess that, and that's really great, but make sure you add those on there and do it in a descriptive way that describes your actions and how you are proactive, how are you effective, how are you a supportive team member. Give them a good insight to who you are on paper. Here's some more examples of what they're looking for: motivated to excel, committed to excellence, leadership skills, ability to critically think, retention, motivated to expand knowledge, compassionate, trustworthy. A lot of these go hand in hand, and you can tie them together. With retention and motivated to expand knowledge, this can be, you can add your career goals here. If you're looking to grow in this facility because you see that they have all these capabilities to take care of these patients, if you want to go back to school so you can further yourself, so you can move up in the career ladder in the health system, that's perfect. And you can add that there too. Ability to critically think is crucial in the healthcare setting. They want you to be able to troubleshoot and get through all these scenarios that you need to be able to successfully provide good patient care. This is a really big one. So we're going to go over some examples of do's and don'ts. And we'll start with the don'ts. So the don'ts, paragraphs and spelling errors. So here in this resume example, there's a lot of spelling errors. Dependent is spelled wrong, careable. We've got treeing, there's a T for that's missing, and discharge. There's a lot of little inaccurate spelling. But also, this is hard to read at a glance. When you look at this, it kind of makes you just take a second, you're like, what is going on here? It's not really clear that what the work history is. There's some scattered information throughout. It's just really hard to piece this together. And this just goes to a good example of, paragraphs are really hard to read. Distracting formats. This one I know is probably very common to have these columns, but this is a little bit harder to read for the recruiter when you're looking at this at a glance. The summary is nice, but you're kind of like hopping all over the place, and you can't forget a recruiter is scanning your resume in 5 to 10 seconds. This one over here, the first thing you see is DOE, BSN, RN, And this is okay to describe like title, location, present year, but you don't really need that extra fluff there. And you can just put, where the location that you worked, the title, and with the dates of employment. And this is another example. This is the paragraph right here. This needs to be bullet points. It's just so much easier in that specific, clean, precise form that those recruiters are wanting. A bullet point gets this point across much better than a paragraph. So a couple more don'ts. Scripted resumes and expected skills. So this career goal reads, to utilize my knowledge and skills as a registered nurse to provide maximum and professional care to all patients that I will be entrusted with. This is expected of all nurses. It's expected that you use your knowledge and your skills and provide all the care to the patients, but get a little creative here and write more descriptive, what knowledge do you have? What skills do you have? And what kind of care do you want to provide these patients? Make yourself stand out a little bit. On this one here, it has registered nurse since June 2014 to present. It gives a list of examples, administering medications and treatments. Once again, that's an expected skill from all healthcare professionals. What medications and what treatments? And don't forget, this is a really good time for you to say what medications and what treatments that you have experience with that are going to go towards this new job that you want. Get specific, pull out the treatments that you have that's going to be utilized in this new job role that you're seeking. Same with supervising licensed practical, that's great. And this one, establishing treatment plans, operating medical equipment. Once again, describe your actions. What medical equipment, what treatment plans? You're going to be asked these things in the interview, but you can go ahead and let them know, like, hey, I'm bringing this to the table. I've got this medical equipment experience and I've done all these treatments. Give yourself that extra boost. You will get noticed, I promise. So common mistakes overview again. Unprofessional email. I know we all like the nicknames and the funny things, and that's fine, but it is noticed by hiring managers. They want to make sure they're taking on someone that's serious about this job as well. Distracting format, that goes back to the examples that we showed earlier with all the pictures and everything moving. Just keep it clean, specific, and precise. Irrelevant job skills and expected skills. Once again, tailor your resume to the job you're applying for. Using one general resume for all nursing jobs. When you submit a general resume that can be used for multiple positions, the hiring managers and the recruiters, they know too. They're going to know if you picked out specific things that go with this job that they are advertising and they're wanting to fill. One good piece of advice is what I would say is on your computer, when you pull up your resume in one window, pull up the job you're applying to in the window next to it and match your resume with that job description. If it says they're looking for impeccable IB skills, put that on your resume if you've got it. Are they looking for excellent bedside manners? You probably have that too. Add that on your resume. Use their job description to help you figure out how to match up and make that good resume. You'll stand out and you will get noticed. And avoid the scripted resume. And this just kind of goes back to the expected skills and expected resume that just makes it more general. Make your resume stand out, build that winning resume. And like I said, my best tip of advice is pull your resume up, pull the job up next to it and match them up.
Yeah, I agree with you, Audra. I'm going to hop in and say that's a really good idea to pull up the job description and use some of the words in it to match it to your resume. And I think the other thing that we've talked about, we see a lot of spelling errors, poor formats, and we get a lot of pictures of resumes in like a JPEG format, like you've taken a picture with your phone. And that is not really something that we can send along to a hiring manager. They're looking for a little bit more of a professional format. And often they have to Zoom to read it. So that was just something I was thinking of as you were going through your don'ts.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Any extra tips of advice is always great. Okay, and then we're gonna go through some do's. So this looks really nice. You can see registered nurse, you see the name, there's the address, there's the location, the phone number, and email. This is also a perfect description of a objective and summary that's going to match up to what you're looking for. So this nurse right here, we already know, dedicated, registered nurse, 7 years of experience assessing patient health problems, maintaining medical records, executing nurse care plans. So we already know what she has experience and how long. Now we know what she's seeking to leverage proven case management skills in your hospital, licensed to practice in California and possess a BS in nursing. So this is a perfect example of quantifying, qualifying, and what you're looking for. This is great. Next up is a little example of using bullet points. This gives the hospital name, location, dates of employment, position held. I would like to see what registered nurse, if you're on the med surgical floor, are you on oncology, are you in the cath lab? That could be one thing that could have been better here, but you can see admission assessments through emergency room. So already we know it was an emergency position. And then also a quantifying example of managing a caseload of 10 patients per shift. And that's a perfect way to see what kind of work they are capable of handling, especially if you're looking for a job in a higher acuity hospital.
Audra, I agree with you that the registered nurse, it should say the specialty next to it, and don't just put the floor either. I see a lot of resumes where it says registered nurse 4 East. I don't know what 4 East was at your hospital. Only you know that, and the people that worked at your hospital. And you make a good point about including the location of the hospital. Often I see just facility names on the resumes. Like if the city name isn't in it, if it's WellPath Solutions, I don't necessarily know what city that was in. Especially myself, I'm not living in the area often where I'm interviewing these candidates. But especially if you're interviewing out of state, putting the location on where you've worked is pretty important.
Yes, agreed. And, a lot of times I'll see people that will put on their resumes, it just says the hospital name, the hospital and the role and the dates, and they'll say same task as below. Yeah, I understand that you might not want to go through and rewrite everything, but you can copy and paste it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You can pull it together, it's not that hard. And to be honest, I know it seems I don't want to do that extra work or whatever it may be. I've already listed that, but it's reflected for the person that's reading your resume, and it is noticed. A good resume and a bad resume and a lacking resume, there's a category for all of them. They don't go unnoticed.
Agree. That's very true, Audra. Very true.
So this, another do is nail your summary. And like I said, if you follow that little tip that we gave you, quantify, qualify, and explain what you're seeking, you can nail your resume. So easy. And then also use a clean, easy to read format. So these are, at a glimpse, these are so much easier to look at than the other ones that had a lot going on. That's a distracting format. These are easy to read. You can tell their name, the objective, which this one is another great example of quantifying. When you're looking at a resume from a recruiter's perspective, you're scanning it. So the first things I see here is committed, clinical nurse manager, 10 years of experience, eager to join Beth Israel Medical Center, previous roles, improved patient satisfaction scores by 40%, maintained employee turnover less than 2%. I didn't even read the whole paragraph, and that's what I got. And I think that's the main points. And that goes to show the qualifying and quantifying your experience. And you can also already see where this candidate is trying to go. That's Israel Medical Center. This also is a great example of work experience, the role, the hospital, the dates, and then even in the bullet points, again, quantifying by saying supervise 15 plus members. On this other one, nursing student resume, which this is going to be popular. We know there's a lot of nursing students out there, and you might not have that experience yet, but you can still make a stellar winning resume. This one, you can see the name, address, phone number, email. You can see the objective is really nice here too, education, and then professional experience. So some top tips to go over again. Sorry about that. Okay, so optimize your resume. Optimizing your resume, meet the job being applied for, give the why behind you want this, give the why behind why you want this job and why you're a good fit. Think of your resume, as I said earlier, being tailored to show the hiring manager to pick you. Nail your summary, quantify yourself, qualify yourself, and explain what you're seeking. Use the driven data results from your unit. These are the CLABC, the COTI, any patient improvement. Those are all yours. It's a shared team responsibility of your unit. You were a part of that. You can put that on your resume. I know we all see those in the break rooms, in the bathrooms, all the bulletins everywhere. That information is out there for you guys, I'm sure, on your unit. Give yourself credit. I know as nurses, we're so used to taking care of other people, and sometimes we don't give ourselves as much credit as we should, but give yourself the credit, brag on yourself, put those good words to describe what you do and who you are. And, they want to know, they want to see you stand out. They want to hire that standout person. And I can't stress enough to use bullet points over paragraphs. Paragraphs are just, they're just hard to read. A bullet point you can see like easy, it's precise, it's clean, and it's just specific. You have to remember these recruiters are reading hundreds of resumes a day. And the more you can be that quick, clean, precise, and get to the point, they're just going to be like, yes, this is easy.
Audra, I really liked on the last page, not the slide there, but the one before it, how they mentioned the hospital. I think it was the Beth Israel Deaconess. That's a really nice touch to put on your resume to say, oh, I'm seeking employment with this specific employer. I think they definitely notice that. And it's really just a simple change that you can make with each resume that you send out to put the specific employer on there. Yeah. I think I definitely notice it. Like, it shows that you went the extra mile, you put in a little bit of extra effort. I also wanted to let everybody know, if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A section or the chat and I will answer them. My name comes up as Shay, but I'm Rachel, but it's me answering them, just so you guys know.
Yay. All right, so we're gonna go back through. And then just some quick extra tips, spell check and proofread. Take this serious. You want this job, right? Like, you sleep on it and then look over it again. I can't stress enough to use a consistent and simple font during this time too. It's not the time to get creative. Don't use the cursive-y, handwritten fonts. Keep it clean, simple, and consistent. Use Times New Roman, use Arial, keep it simple. And then clean and uniform and keep it updated. I see a lot of resumes that aren't updated, and it's not because, anybody's not wanting to do it, but a lot of people don't realize how far outdated their resumes are. When you're on a call and you're like, oh, like, I see that you work here. And they're like, no, I actually work here. And it's like, okay, like, it really stalls out the conversation, and, it takes a little extra time to get that updated resume. So keep it updated, clean and uniform, simple font, spell check. The application tracking system. So I didn't know about an application tracking system until I worked here. This is all new information, and I have learned an abundance being on this side of the spectrum for our healthcare professional world. So application tracking system. This is a robotic system that scans resumes and pulls the best fitting one. They have built-in parsers that rank candidates for best matching purposes. It's also programmed to know keywords the specific job code wants. What this means is before it even gets to a recruiter, you're going through a robotic system that knows how to read text and is programmed with specific keywords that match that job. So if you're applying for an infusion job, anything that is related in that job description that you read online is what they're looking for when you submit your application. So this just goes back to show like pulling up your resume in one window and the job in the other, and matching your job and your skills to what that job is looking for and qualification for a candidate. The built-in parser, this knows down to the finer details of how much one resume matches what they're looking for, how much more it matches than another one. So say, you know, this specific manager job is looking for someone with 5 years of experience. All right, I'm going to submit my job. I have 5 years of experience, and Rachel submits hers and she has 6. Rachel goes up a rank because of a simple number. It's that smart. And this also goes with the language, how I was saying earlier, like if it says on that job description, impeccable, excellent, proficient, all those types of words, those are words they're going to be looking for on your resume as well. According to Forbes, studies show that 75% of qualified applicants are rejected by the ATS because they can't be read. This means there could be the way your document is saved. You know, pay attention how the file is saved. You know, if it has too many pictures or tables, it's going to see it as pictures and tables and no text is getting read. You can have text in a table, but it's hidden in that table and the text is never scanned by the robotic system, and you're going to get, you know, your resume is going to get spit right out. So this is really important to, you know, make sure your resume is in tip-top shape. And I think that covers it. So we have time for some questions and answers. You know, any kind of conversation you guys want to start up, feel free to ask us. We can go back, we can do whatever you need. And then as Rachel mentioned earlier, we're going to have 10 people picked from this that attended the live webinar for their resume building workshop and some help from our concierge team.
Audra, we do have a couple of questions that I think we can go over together with them. I'll start with the Q&A ones. The first one was, is there a file format that's preferred, Word, PDF, when submitting a resume, and how should that file be titled? I know you did a lot of research on that, so I'll let you answer that one.
On how it should be titled and saved? Yeah,
like should it be titled Rachel Norton resume, January resume, and then what format should it be in? Word document, PDF? We talked about don't send a picture of it.
Yeah, basically the ones that you want to avoid the most is like a JPEG. PDF is okay. The .docx here is good. .txt is good. But if you can't do it on your notes in your phone and save that. It really needs to be a Word doc. It needs to be a PDF. It needs a TXT. Avoid the JPEGs. And if you guys need more information on that, we can sure post something as well. I think that covers most of it.
Yeah. The other one was, what do we think about Indeed resumes? So I think this would actually be a great opportunity, Audra, to discuss how we can generate a resume in the same way.
Yes. So on Vivian, you can also do a resume. So Indeed resumes, I have a little bit of, they're easy to read. But when I see that resume, I know exactly where it came from. And, I think that would kind of fall into a general resume. If that's the only thing you have access to, like I understand, but I would urge you to use a different document. You can still use that same information, but if you use more than just an Indeed resume, it shows that you've created and done the extra mile. And who doesn't want a worker that does a little bit extra?
Good point. Good point, Audra.
Do you have any?
No, I think that's the same. We do offer a function on Vivian where you can download a resume from your profile if you don't have it. But what it does is it takes the information of whatever's in your profile and converts it to a PDF. So I think it's a great option if you have never made a resume or don't know how to make a resume, but you need to make sure that your entries are very detailed, especially your work experience entries, because that's what's going to pull the information from. So as you're filling out your Vivian profile, the more detail you add, the better. And then you can click download a resume and create a PDF version. But I do agree, a organic version shows that you've gone to the effort to put in, you know, a little bit more and try to get the hiring manager's attention.
Yeah, my best advice is to, go outside of the Indeed resume. Vivian's looks great on our platform. It's a really good layout and that looks nice as well. But yeah, when I see an Indeed resume, I know where it came from.
Yeah. This one was a good one. It was, how long should a resume be, especially if you have many years of employment? And stop me if I'm wrong, Audra. I tell people to make their resume as long as it needs to be. That being said, if you've been a nurse for 30 years and you're applying to, say, a case management job, I wouldn't necessarily put my employment back 25 years ago if it's nothing that's going to relate to that case management job. If you were a case manager 25 years ago, I would definitely include that. It's all about kind of keeping that relevant information on your resume versus things that won't really matter to the hiring manager. So I know the traditional advice is keep it one page, but I think 2 or 3 pages is okay, as long as your entries are relevant to the job that you're applying for. And if it's something you've never done before, then I would say I would go back 7 years in your employment, and you can always put at the bottom of those entries, more details can be given during an interview about my work history due to the fact that I've been a nurse for 30 years or something like that. I think
rule of thumb too, if you don't want to go back in that long in your work history, I've had the recruiters tell me 7 years history is plenty for them.
Good.
So, but I don't think a resume can be, I mean, of course, anything can be too long, right? But if you stick to that 7 years of work history, that's perfectly fine. My biggest urge in response to that is please avoid paragraphs and use the bullet points. I can't stress enough is the specific and clean, because they really do spend 5 to 10 seconds scanning your resume. And if you have the bullet points and it's just boom, 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 you're going to be great. And just make sure it's the reverse chronological order, because they want to see what you've been up to this last 3 to 5 years. Really, they're going to hone in on the last 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're just again, looking for anything relevant.
Exactly.
We got a couple more questions here. There was one that was asked during the webinar that was, if you've gotten a promotion at work, example, this says CN1 to CN2, which I don't know if that's charge nurse, but same if it was RN1 to RN2, 3, or 4, should that be listed as 2 different entries under work history or as one? And I would recommend keeping it under the same entry, and you would make the heading to your entry, the bold part, your most senior role there. And in the bullet points and the descriptions, you can describe how you got the promotion or what you had to do to get the promotion, which will also help highlight your skills. But you really only need to list the one role that you had there, the one that you ended up in. If you changed specialties, so if you worked for med surge for 6 years and then you went into the ICU for 6 years, I would make 2 separate entries for that for the same employer, because it's obviously 2 very separate roles that you were doing there.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And I would do, I'm assuming that's probably clinical nurse 1, 2. You could do your most recent role. And then, as Rachel had said, put that in a bullet point, and you could put advanced from clinical 1 nurse by, completing so many tasks, so many hours. However you achieve that, don't forget to quantify your experience and show what you did to achieve that next level.
Yeah, any committees you joined or any classes you took.
Exactly.
I know there's a bunch of questions. These are great, guys. Great questions. The other question was, should you spell out numbers on your resume? For example, 22 years as TWENTYTWO or 22.
Use the numbers. Yeah.
Use the actual numbers, the digits. So the 22 would be the answer to that one. That was asked by, it looks like 80. And yes, it will be available for replay. The whole thing is being recorded, so it will definitely be available for you to review. back to the Q&A over here because I don't want to go out of order for you guys. If a resume is more than one page, does it get the chance of it getting noticed go down?
No.
No, I don't think so. No.
It's okay. It's like I said, go back to having it be specific, clean, and uniform. And I can't urge enough, stay away from the paragraphs except for your objective summary. Stick with the bullet points.
Yes, agree. And what abbreviations are okay to use on a nursing resume? I'm wondering about words like IV, ICU, COTI, CLAPSy, etc. What's your opinion on that, Audra?
I would say abbreviations are okay for certain things. And honestly, what I would do too is go back to the job description and look and see what they have abbreviated. And if they're looking for CRRT or ICU or IV, if they have it abbreviated, you're probably fine. You know, I see ACLS, like I would spell ACLS out and then you could put in parentheses ACLS. But IV, I think you're okay to just say IV. ICU, I would spell it out at one point. If you're giving yourself a title, spell it out, and then you can use the abbreviations another time.
I think that's a good piece of advice in general. Like if you're unsure whether you should use the abbreviation, spell it out once and put the abbreviation in parentheses, and then you can use the abbreviation the rest of the time. And I wouldn't go rogue and start using abbreviations that aren't commonly known in nursing. Especially I've worked in a couple different states and you'd be surprised how the abbreviations don't transfer.
Right.
I have worked for different positions under the same organization. Should I still list the organization for each position or just mention the organization on top than each position underneath? I think we kind of answered that. If they were different positions, I would list them as different entries.
Yeah, and I would put the facility on there because if I got your resume and it said Beth Israel Medical Center and it said this job, this job, this job, this job, I'd be like, wait, where were those jobs at? So I would put Beth Israel Medical Center just to reduce confusion.
Agree.
It just shows your advancement because I had someone the other day I was talking to and their resume had a couple things that were really confusing. And during our conversation, I was like, if you could just like change this up a little bit, it's going to explain what you were doing so much better. It's just those little tiny details. And so I would add the facility name with each position held just to reduce confusion.
Agree. This is a good one. How would you suggest formatting travel assignments on a resume, given an RN has had 5+ assignments? I would still say go back 2 to 3 years, right, in your history. And I know that sounds like a lot of entries, especially if you're working short-term assignments, but if you don't include them, the hiring manager or recruiter is going to wonder why you had a gap in employment. So if the travel job, like maybe you worked a travel job last year in med-surg and now you're applying for a case manager role, if none of your skills in med-surg cross over to what you're applying for, you could just put the facility, the location, and you could just put travel job for 13 weeks with, and you always want to include the agency that you were with also. You don't really have to go into an in-depth description on every single assignment since many of them are going to be the same. But like Audra said, don't put same as above, see above. If anything, copy and paste the description of what you were doing. Travel nursing too, I always like to talk about, you know, I had no call outs while I was travel nursing. I was offered an extension. The manager asked me to precept. Here's how many patients I took. This was the expectation on my unit. So there are things that you can include about your travel nurse assignments that will cross over to perm jobs, especially how many patients you took, any certifications that were required, any compliments that you got during your travel assignments could also be included on there.
That's great advice, especially on those things where you had no call outs. You were asked to precept. Those are really good things that sometimes you don't think to put on your resume because it's not a traditional bullet point or it's not traditional information, but that's really good information. I want to read you guys this quote that I got from one of our recruiters that we work hand in hand with. She said, I would emphasize candidates that they need to cater their resumes for the job they're seeking. You know, and that goes hand in hand with, you know, she's like, I would also ask them to expand on vague statements such as I am driven or I am hardworking or I am a team player. Every applicant says that. I want examples of this testament, such as I would pick up additional shifts so that patient care wasn't compromised at my last job. I stayed out of drama by being available and helpful for work, but not gossip.
If I saw a nurse was struggling, I offered to take one of her patients to lighten her load. I was a resource to the staff nurses because they were all new or something along those lines.
Yeah. And those are just such good little points that, you might not see as traditional, but like they want to see that. It's going to build your winning resume and you're going to stand out.
Agree, 100%. The next question kind of ties in with that. For travel nursing experience, would you just add the company and the locations you've worked? Any other information other than the work experience itself, the unit dates and location? So kind of what we just talked about. Anything that stands out, how many patients you were expected to care for. If you got floated, that's another really great thing because maybe you were hired to work med surg, but you got floated to oncology. And now all of a sudden you magically have oncology experience. So you might be eligible for an oncology job somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about time lapses in employment as well as time lapses in specialty?
Oh, this is such a good one.
Yeah, this is a really good one.
Please put that what happened. Recently, a lot of people probably took off during the pandemic. They want to see a reason why, because like when I see job tenures and when I see gaps in employment, I'm automatically going like, oh, I wonder what happened here. But if you go ahead and put that on there, once again, you're minimizing that guesswork for the recruiters.
And you can work that in chronologically. So you can put, 2017 to 2018 med surg at XYZ hospital, and then maybe 2018 to March of 2020, you were OR at another hospital, and then you decided to take off, and you can put it above that next entry, March 2020 until September 2020, laid off due to COVID, took personal time off. I travel out of the country a lot for extended periods of time. So my resume has 3-month gaps where it just says international travel for leisure. And that is usually enough to satisfy the questions of why did you have a gap in employment?
Yeah, because that covers the question that they already have in their head, and you can just go ahead and just boop,
why weren't you working? Right. As far as gap in specialty, I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, but I would include, like if you were OR 5 years ago, maybe you've been working med surg since then, I would still include the med surg experience because otherwise they're going to wonder what you were doing for the last 5 years. Maybe you're trying to get back into a different specialty. With perm, that's not a huge deal if you're just changing specialties, but in travel, they do, I'm sure as many of you know, prefer that you have usually something around 1,000 hours at the bedside within the last 12 months. So you won't necessarily be able to apply for a labor and delivery job, even though you worked it 3 years ago, if you've been working med surg since then. But anything relevant, and avoid, like Audra said, avoid the gaps in employment because you're going to be asked anyways why those gaps are there.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, please let me know. And this one, if you're a new grad or have minimal related work experience in the field, should education be above work experience? I don't think so. I think that you could put your most recent job. If you've never held a job, you can put work experience, you can put none, or you can put your, a lot of people I've seen put their clinicals experience, and anything that is stand out from those, any compliments that you got from patients or your instructor, any awards that you got during school. Those are, I know they're not paid experiences, but with the lack of anything else to write, you could include that. That kind of ties in with this question from Valerie. It says, what if you don't have the 7 years of nursing experience? Would you still list a previous non-nursing job?
So I like what Rachel had to say here. And you can't forget, a lot of your jobs, what do they have that a nurse needs as well? Customer service, managing people, being a people person, being a leadership in the community. All of those things are good, hard and soft skills that are related to in the hospital, driving success for customers, customer service things. And
kind of anything that's related. I was a waitress before I was a nurse. So I put that on my resume when I applied because I had to multitask. Sometimes I feel like a waitress as a nurse, right? I mean, I think we've all felt that way.
We're still in the service industry for sure,
At some point in time. Yeah. But anything, if it's relevant, I mean, if you were even a you worked at a car dealership as a secretary, just point out anything, anytime you were organized, anytime you had to be a team player, all of those skills that Audra mentioned that people are looking for. If you displayed those in other jobs, I would definitely put that down as a new grad, because it will show the hiring manager that you do have a work experience, you've worked in a professional environment, and you know what your strengths and weaknesses are.
Yeah. And proven ability to be a team player, proven ability to,
Stay organized, time
together.
management. I mean, any of those things could cross over from other professions.
And I would also add a little tip here from another recruiter on here. It says, a lot of people will put little cheap statements in here, and when they ask for further explanation, they can't provide specific instances or situations. In other words, be able to give situational context to any I statement. So when you add something to your resume, be ready to explain how and why you were that, whatever that qualification you're saying you have, like be ready to explain it.
I've actually in the past, and maybe I'm an overachiever, but that's okay. As I'm doing my resume, if I think of things like that, like, oh, this time that I did this, an example, I will have a separate document as kind of an interview prep document for myself where they're talking points for me. So when I'm sitting in front of the hiring manager and I'm nervous and I can't think about what I want to say, I have these examples in front of me to draw from, rather than just being like, I'm good at Foley's. Like,
Yeah.
they want something a little bit better than that. So as you're going through your resume, if you think of things, put those statements aside and keep them for yourself, so that it kind of provides a little interview prep for you as well.
Yeah. And I know life is busy, but just take the time to sit down and really give yourself a pat on the back for all these skills and why you have them and how you carry them out. Like it really feels good when you give yourself that credit.
Yeah, agree. How do employers assess recency or continuity within the resume? Is it vital that candidates have experience within the last year? I think we kind of touched on this for permanent jobs. Many permanent jobs do want to see that you were in some role in the last year in healthcare, whether you're allied health or nursing or whatever your role is. It doesn't have to be in that specialty per se, like maybe you're a respiratory therapist and you were working in long-term care and now you're trying to transition to acute care. If you have no employment for the last year, they're going to ask why you have the employment gap. And right now with the interest in travel nursing, I know there's a huge demand, but there's also a very, very huge interest in it, more than ever before. There's not a lot of, the hospitals aren't desperate necessarily for, in the past, they might take an ICU nurse and into the PACU because they don't have PACU nurses that were wanting to travel. But I think now it's pretty saturated and they're not really needing to cross-train people with their specialties. So they are a little bit strict about that you must have experience within the last year for a travel position in the specialty that you're applying to.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. I hope that answers your question. Again, if not, feel free to let me know in the chat. Audra, do you have anything to add to that?
I think what I'm hearing on that question is if you've kind of been out of, maybe away from bedside for a little while, you're definitely going to want to be in a facility somewhere that, that you have those skill sets that they need. Usually facilities are going to be somewhere that's more acceptable for that, but it definitely needs to be in a specialty that you have good knowledge of and a good history there. But it's definitely out there for sure.
And I think it's, again, it's a great reason to even make your resume even better if you've been away from the bedside, and make it relevant to the job that you're applying to, and really think about how you can cross the role with what you're in now with what you're applying to. With ATS systems, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Audra, but if there is a hard requirement that you must have 2 years of recent experience and your resume doesn't have that, the ATS system, with ATS system, I know the S system, I don't know why I say that. The ATS will toss that resume out because you don't have the relevant experience. If it's a hard requirement for them.
It could definitely discard it, but I still think that you should, and if you have been I think you should apply, but I think if you have been away from bedside, to kind of polish up those skills and give yourself a refreshers. There's CEUs out there, there's free CEUs, there's free education, kind of polish up your skills with that, and that'll boost your confidence as well when it comes to talking about what you've done in the past.
And it'll show, I think, hiring managers that you've made the effort to say, oh, hey, I've been out of the field for a little bit, I'm trying to get back in.
I would go to imagine that we're going to see a lot of that with the pandemic. A lot of people have taken time off, and and that's okay too.
So this is would you include if at a job for only 3 months for COVID, should that be included? Yes, I would include any jobs that you have worked, because if it's not there, again, they're going to ask you about the gap in employment. So it's better to have it just there with the description of what you did there and not have to think of something on the spot when they ask you, hey, where were you during these 3 months?
Right. And if you need to like put a reason for leaving or whatever you want to explain on there, like this is your resume. And if you think that they might want to know that, just go ahead and add it. That's completely okay too. But any job counts, and they want to see that. I've definitely had a candidate before that got questioned because it was like, well, they didn't add this employment on there. Like, why wouldn't they add this? So, just do yourself a favor sometimes.
Yeah, agree. And what is the best title for the doc? I think we talked about this. I think your first and last name resume is probably the best and easiest one.
I think that's the best. Anytime I have to like resave something that came through as numbers, I put their first, last name, and resume.
Yeah, because then if they're looking for it, if they've downloaded it in their system, they can just type in your name into their folder and your resume comes right up. Or even their email, they can type into your name and everything will come up with any emails from you, especially your resume.
Yeah, agreed.
Belle, what if my name is hard to pronounce? Is it okay to put the phonemic notation? So if your name is hard to pronounce, should you describe how to phonetically pronounce it on your resume? I've never thought of that. I don't think that's a terrible idea though.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I've definitely had people that I've had a hard time pronouncing their names, and they're like, it's okay, I go by Danny. And I'm like, oh, okay, nice. But they didn't have that on their resume. But I mean, if that's something you want to add, and as long as it looks clean and uniform, feel free to add it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but just make sure it looks good. If it seems confusing, a little bit of confusing, it probably is confusing. Rule of thumb.
Yeah, I think it's okay to put there for the more difficult names, but I think there must be some sort of app or website that you can use to like say, what's the phonetic spelling of my name? And I would probably use something like that just to keep it consistent rather than trying to sound it out on your own, especially for the like lines over the vowels or the ones that make it like this to like say how to pronounce the vowel. You know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, like
Let's see. Should we note gaps in employment on the resume document? What if I was out of work? I think we chatted about that. That was from a little while ago. Yes,
Yeah,
definitely include any gaps and explain them right on the resume. I didn't work for 3 years because I had a baby and had to stay home and watch my kid and feed my kid. So, I mean, that's perfectly acceptable. And again, it leaves less questions for the person looking at your resume.
Mhm.
Otherwise, it almost looks like you're trying to not include it, and that raises some suspicion among people sometimes.
Yeah, it is noticed and it's appreciated when you guys put the reason of the gap.
What about new nurses in their first year of practice? What is the best way to highlight limited job experience? Again, with the clinicals, I would list your nursing clinicals, anything that you stood out there, any compliments that you received, any really great experiences that you had, and then anything from if you had a job before that, which I recognize that not everybody worked before they were a nurse. Anything that can be applicable to nursing, like we said, time management, organization, team player.
Was this question, did they say they did have a year?
Is it in their first year of practice? So
Yeah,
probably as a new grad or.
Yeah. So for example, like I talked to someone that had 6 months recently, but she was able to, she had a plethora of experience with, titrating cardizem drips, titrating heparin drips. She had seen all types of drains and chest tubes and stuff like that. Use those. Like those are really great things that you get exposure to and that you use. Like that's good information.
And it's impressive as an experienced nurse or a hiring manager to say, oh, the new grad nurse remembered the names of these drugs and these specific experiences, because you see so much in nursing school. So even putting down a few experiences that you had shows that you were paying attention, you were putting some thought into it, and that these experiences were valuable to you.
Yeah, and it could even be like titrating heparin drip for saddle pulmonary embolism patients. Boom, that's a great one. that's good experience.
Yeah, it is. All right. What if you have almost 6 years of nursing experience? Do you still have to list a previous employment that isn't nursing related to reach that 7 years of employment? No, unless it's relevant. I wouldn't know if you have 6 years. Honestly, I think 2 to 3 years is probably fine for most employers. I would just go further back again if you're applying for a job in a role that you haven't worked in a while and you want to go back to that time to highlight it, then you're going to have to include everything in between also. Otherwise, it looks like you have a gap in employment. Does that make sense, Audra? Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I still would urge to do the 7 years of experience if you have the 7 years, but if you don't have the 7 years, outside, like if you are a nurse for 3 to 4 years, but you have like a waitress or you worked in a clinic setting or whatever it may be that you did, just do your nursing background.
I would include if you were like a CNA, an LPN, even in a clerical role in a hospital, a volunteer, a PCA, a PCT, a lab tech. I would include anything that is in a healthcare role because it just shows that you've been in healthcare.
Agreed. Like clinic wasn't the best example, but yeah.
Let's see. I'm looking for a permanent role. Should my resume be presented differently than if I were applying for a travel contract? Probably a little bit. You really want to, as Audra has mentioned, tailor your resume to, let's say you're applying to a specific facility or hospital. What I do is I get on their website and I go to their mission and I write down keywords and statements that are in their mission statement and I incorporate those into my resume. So while I'm looking for a permanent role, I'm going to apply to 3 different hospitals. I actually have 3 different resumes. They're all sort of the same resume. But I do what we talked about earlier. And I say, applying for an ICU nurse role at Denver Health. Like I name the hospital system or the specific facility. And then in my summary is where I kind of change things to tailor it towards that hospital's website to match what they say.
Yeah. And
go ahead, Audra.
I was just thinking, actually, you and I have talked about this before. With travel nursing, it's very skill driven. What skills can you just hop in and go and use? And then as Rachel had said, like using the mission statement and all these other like extra things of more soft skills and, interpersonal things, like that's absolutely right. But yeah, travel nursing is very skill driven and they want to know what you can do.
Travel nursing is looking for specific skills, years of experience, and maybe a certain certification. Where permanent roles, they have a little bit more flexibility. They're looking for some, like Audra said, the softer skills. So my recommendation would be probably for travel nursing, you could stick with 1 resume because you're going to be most likely applying to the same role. Unless for some reason you have 2 specialties, and I would make 2 different resumes. But for perm jobs, I would go about it in changing the wording a little bit to match the mission statement and including the name of the facility where you're applying. That's going to get the attention of the hiring manager, I think, versus just the generic resume.
Mm-hmm.
Great question, though. Should we specify months employed or just years? I would vote for months on that. So the example was April 2019 through February 2020, or just 2019 to 2020. And I would say definitely include the months.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
You agree, Audrey?
For sure. I mean, because you could, some people that weren't there for, a full year or whatever, like just reduce the questions and put the months. It's just so
especially for travel nursing, because they're going to want to know, especially if your experience is maybe a little bit iffy, if it looks like you don't have a full year or 2 years, if they require that, they're going to want to know what months you were there for in that facility or in your perm role or wherever it was.
Right.
So awesome and helpful. Thank you both. Well, thank you for the compliment. What about highlighting GPA for recent grads? That's also a great question. And I think if your GPA was good, then yes, put it on there. If it was above, probably, I don't know, what would you say, Audra, like a 3.5?
I mean, honestly though, like if you have a 3.2 and you're proud of that, put it on there. I just think that any type of achievement is awesome. If you're in the top of your class and you want to add that into after your education and stuff for like accomplishments and all that type of stuff, like do add it, give yourself all that boost and that confidence. that you can get on that resume. If you want to add it, I say you add it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think if, like I said, if it's good, then why not add it? And that I think is the